Hello, good afternoon, evening, or early morning, depending on where you're from. My name is Castellana de Andalucia. I am from Ansteorre, Principality of Windheim, Northern Ansteorre. I am Ansteorre's Kingdom Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging Officer. I have my contact information, my personal contact information here. I have also copied it to the chat, as well as a link to the Google Doc for this presentation. I do have a lot of slides. Some of them I'll just be zooming past, but they are all in that Google Doc for you to take a look at your convenience. I'm going to have to, maybe that'll work. Okay, so objectives of this class. The primary objective is to gain a historically accurate sense of the Romani people throughout the Middle Ages and Renaissance and dispel the misconceptions, bigotry, and the damaging Hollywood stereotypes that have permeated both modern society and the SCA. And then a bonus is to give you the information and tools needed to play a Romani persona in the SCA as accurately and respectfully as possible. So just starting off with the basic term, Romani. Romani is an umbrella term used to describe a diverse ethno-linguistic group of people with a historical presence in Europe and West Asia. I promise I'll figure out how to use my keyboard here in a minute. Name and identity. For the most of history, there was no universal name for the Romani in their own language. There are a bunch of different groups that all fall under the Romani umbrella, and they all used different words in their respective dialects to identify themselves, as well as to identify other groups under the Romani umbrella. The closest thing we have now in the Romani language itself is Rom or Romni, which basically means man or woman. And in present day, Romani or Roma are the most widely accepted terms. However, the Romani label is a modern invention intended to make it easier to discuss the overlapping history and experiences of these groups, but was not used this way prior to the 20th century. For most of history, there was no unified Romani identity or nation. Content warning, and I will use this content warning, I believe, 3 different times within this presentation. The following slide uses the names, the historical names for the Romani period within period in various languages, many of which are now considered racial slurs. So the historical names. In English, were gypsies. In Greek, and my Greek is horrible, Segonoi. In Central and Eastern Europe, it was Segani. In French, it's Gitans. Italian, Zigari. Spanish, Gitanos. And Portuguese, Ziganos. So why are these terms now considered racial slurs? In the case of the Greek and Eastern Central European terms, the name originates from the Greek word that literally means untouchable. Other modern variations of the same original Greek word mean dirty or outcast. And in the case of the Western European terms, they are misnomers formed from the incorrect assumption that the Romani were originally from Egypt. So these are loaded words. And by loaded words, I mean words that carry additional emotional weight or significance. Apart from these labels being forced onto the Romani, as opposed to labels that they chose for themselves, these words carry with them a history of exile, exploitation, indignity, slavery, corporal punishment, forced separation from families, forced sterilization, murder, and when we move into modern times in the Holocaust, attempted genocide. So I do ask that we make a community agreement, both within this class and moving forward, that we stick to using the terms Romani or Roma and avoid using any of the aforementioned racial slurs or loaded words. There is definitely something to be said for linguistic reappropriation or reclamation, which is taking a term back from being used against you in a negatory way and using it as an uplifting or empowering word. Unfortunately, that linguistic class, I do not have time to do the entire linguistic class. So for brevity, I ask that we stick to using the term Romani or Roma. So the origin stories of the Romani. The Romani can be tracked back to India in the Punjab region, and the Romani language is related to Sanskrit. More than 1,000 years ago, they began to leave India, heading westward in successive waves. It wasn't a singular Romani diaspora. There were at least 3 major, and I believe 2 or 3 minor diasporas from India. So the Romani were leaving India in waves. And they crossed the Middle East and arrived in continental Europe during the Middle Ages. There is no precise explanation of how the Romani came to exist as a mainly migratory group within Europe, partially because different groups of the Romani share diverse histories, and there are few factual records of the introductory description of the Romani diaspora. It is most commonly acknowledged, and that is an oddly worded sentence. It is most commonly acknowledged that the Romani originated in northern India and deported across the Middle East and Europe in response to the incursions by Islam and the threats of war. It has been recounted that the Romani first arrived in Europe through the Byzantine Empire around the year 1068. Oftentimes, the Romani are called a people without a history. But the truth is that the story of the Romani is a journey which has not been written down. And for that reason, there exists room for speculation and myth. Romani as a language was not first written down until the 70s. And by 70s, I mean the 1970s. It has been almost a consistently oral language. So all the documentation and all the stories that we have about who the Romani were and where they came from in period were written by non-Romanis. So that is one of the biggest reasons for the discrepancies and the lack of first-person accounts. The when and where. In a few more slides, I'm going to give a very, very long, drawn-out chronology of the Romani's diaspora through Eastern and Western Europe. In this list, I will have certain dates highlighted in red and green. The reds are the first recording of the Romani in a particular area, and green is when the first anti-Romani laws in that particular area went into effect. My reasoning for this is red traffic lights. Red means stopped. That's when they stopped in an area, and then green means when they moved out of that area. But first, a little bit of definition clarification. Nomadic, migratory, and diasporic, I've heard them used synonymously, so I'd like to give a little bit of dictionary definitions to these. Nomadic is roaming from place to place aimlessly, frequently, or without a fixed pattern of movement. Migratory involves the movement of people from one place to another with intentions of settling permanently or temporarily at a new location. And diasporic is being or related to any group that has been dispersed outside of its traditional homeland involuntarily. So 2 of these definitions apply to the Romani, and that's diasporic and migratory. They were pushed out of India involuntarily. It was not their choice to leave. Some accounts say that it was them being co-opted into slavery, into military slavery. And then when the political climate of the area changed, they were then forced out. but they were also migratory. Their predominant occupations largely took place at local fairs or festivals. And so the Romani in a specific area tended to migrate between fair and fair, but that means that at any given time of year or at the same time each year, they would move back to a singular, to the same place. So they were both diasporic and they were migratory. So this is a very simplified map, just to give you a little idea of how the Romani traversed out of India into the Middle East, Byzantine Empire, and then Europe. But we will go over the more specific details in the chronology. Again, with this is my second content warning. The following chronology attempts to use the exact verbiage of the correlating sources when available, and often these sources would use those racial slurs or loaded words. I always want to give people a heads up when they might see some of these racial slurs or when I might be using them in my presentation. And this is part of the presentation that I'm going to go through really quickly. But on this first slide where you see in red, the Roma reached the Byzantine Empire. And then we can go through and just kind of see how extensive this chronology is. And we can stop here, and in 1468, the Roma were recorded in Cyprus. 1471, the first, and I'm going to use the word Romani here, the first anti-Romani laws are passed in Switzerland. 1482, the first anti-Romani laws are passed in the state of Brandenburg. We can keep going, and these highlighted in green tend to get a little bit more severe in their wording. For example, 1500, at the request of Maximilian I, the Augsburg Reich declared that the Roma were traitors to the Christian countries and accused them of witchcraft, kidnapping of children, and banditry. We start reading further on, 1504, the Roma are prohibited from living in France. And as we get further down, it talks of these anti-Romani laws going into effect with punishments such as having a hand removed, slavery, hanging, and the like, and even worse. And you'll also notice as we get through these timelines, we start running out of things that are highlighted in red, and it becomes almost predominantly green. And that's because historically and modernly, people unfortunately don't like those that look or dress or behave differently than they do. And so when the Romani moved into an area and started participating in the local fairs and festivals, they were immediately marked as outsiders. And after a few years or a few decades in certain areas, the local authorities would then try to pass laws to get these individuals removed from those areas. My phone is making obscene noises. In 1560, Spanish legislation forbids the Romani from traveling in groups of more than two. It forbids them from dressing in their traditional clothing. Their clothing was banned. And the punishment being 18 years in the galleys. And that for those of anyone over the age of 14. Legislation is later passed that altered this, that altered the change to punishment of death. see if there are any. 1561 in France. The punishment simply for residing in France, the punishment was banishment. Second offense would result in being placed in the galleys or corporal punishment. Men, women, and children would have their heads shaved. Seeing if there are any others that a lot of times their trades were banished, while still open to the non-Romani of the area. Romani were, legislation was passed that made it illegal to participate in the horse trade or in repairing copper pots and tinkering, which were all, I've lost all my words, which were very prominent occupations for the Romani, especially in Western Europe. So for the purpose of persona building, if you're interested in playing a Romani persona in the SCA, someone looking for a Spanish Romani persona would need to focus on a time after 1425, when the Romani were first recorded in Spain, but before 1499, when the Medina del Campo in Spain orders that all Romani to find a trade and master cease traveling, all within 60 days. Punishment for failure to obey was 100 lashes and banishment. Repeat offenses are punishable by the amputation of the ears, 60 days in chain, and banishment. Third-time offenders become slaves of those who captured them. So the Romani time window in particular areas is very narrow. For the sake of SCA documentation and persona building, we can reasonably assume that Romani were present in an area before they were first documented. And we can also reasonably assume that it took a while after those laws were implemented before they actually started going into effect. So this generally gives someone looking for a Spanish Romani persona the 1400s in which to focus their research. I do want to break because I know I'm talking quickly. Does anyone have any questions about the chronology part or the definitions? Okay, I'm very comfortable being interrupted. So if you want to jump in or need to jump in to ask something or ask for clarification, I am perfectly okay with that. So what did the Romani look like in period? Specifically, how did they dress? There are 5 aspects to Romani garb. And I will give the caveat that resources for Romani period clothing are predominantly from Western Europe. And that is their head covering, jewelry, undergarments, outer garments, or shoes, or lack thereof. Head covering. While the style of head covering is probably the most varied throughout all the different sources, it is the most prevalent. Author Jean-Claude Kleber, both he and the Patron Web Journal associate this with the modern tradition of a young woman who upon marriage would have a scarf or diklo ceremony, ceremonially tied to her head by her new mother-in-law or by other prominent females in the community. And this head covering now becomes a symbol of her marital status. And as such, she is never again seen in public without it. Borrowing from modern Romani customs, the hair was the sexual or the sexy part of the body. It was quite common to see Romani women bathing topless in streams or public fountains. The breasts were not considered sexual in any way, but the hair was considered extremely sexual, which is why as a married woman, you would always keep your head covered. Having your hair uncovered and your hair flowing would denote that you are looking for attention. This marital status also applies to women who would be considered over marriageable age or spinsters. And when we are talking about Romani culture, that spinster age starts pretty young. So whether you were married or not, by about 25 years old, you would predominantly keep your head covered at all times. These diklo appear as simple veils that are pinned to the top of the head, or pinned to a piece. Let me try that again. As a simple veil pinned to the top of the head with a piece of material wrapped around the forehead. Sometimes it's shown as a full head covering, both the head and the neck, resembling that of modern hijabs. Turbans are also depicted. And in 2 instances, the women are depicted wearing a flat disc-like hat tied under their chins. On many of the head coverings, there is intricate red or black embroidery on it. And in one case, there is elaborate trim and tassels sewn onto the diklo. Jewelry. In only a few pieces of art are women shown wearing any sort of earrings. However, the anonymously written 1427 document, forgive my French, Le Journal de Bourgeois de Paris, which states, indeed, nearly all of them had their ears pierced, and in each wore 1 or 2 silver earrings. And they said that this was the fashion in their country. But no elaborate jewelry of any kind is seen in any of the pieces, period pieces of art. In few cases, a simple strand of red beads is probably worn, most likely coral. What? No rings on every finger, an elaborately beaded necklace, no hip scarves with gold coins dangling down? So why the lack of this singular identifying aspect of the Romani look that has come to permeate our modern minds? There are 2 possible reasons for this. One is an engagement tradition. And this is from the Patron Web Journal. The symbol of this joyous celebration is a bottle of wine or brandy wrapped in a brightly colored silk handkerchief brought to the ceremony by the young man's father. A necklace of gold coins is traditionally attached to the bottle. The groom-to-be's father takes the necklace of coins and puts it around the future bride's neck and warmly embraces his future daughter-in-law. The necklace makes it clear to all that this girl is now engaged and not available as a bride to any other man. This engagement or pliska tradition may be one possible birth of our association with Romani women and gold coin jewelry. And also why we don't see it depicted in art, because these ceremonies would have been relatively private and probably would not have been the topic of period artwork. Second possible reason is a conflation in our collective minds between the Romani and the Amazi. The Amazi are an ethnic group indigenous to North Africa, specifically Morocco, Algeria, Tanzania, and Libya. In 711, Muslim forces invaded and in 7 years conquered the Iberian Peninsula, and it became one of the great Muslim civilizations, reaching its summit in the 10th century. And Muslim rule in Spain didn't end until 1492, when Granada was conquered by Ferdinand II and Isabel I. I apologize, I need to address my child. Kellen, back in your room, please. Back in your room, please. So talking about Northern Africa and moving that Northern African part of that Muslim rule, part of that great nation included southern Spain. And so these are modern images, but these are images of some Amazi women from Morocco. And so we can assume that the Amazi were both present in Northern Africa and the Iberian Peninsula around the same time. And if we look back at that chronology, we see a large overlap of when the Romani first became prevalent in southern Spain and when the Amazi would have still been prevalent in southern Spain. So it's entirely possible that the idea of Romani being decked in lots of rings and coin scarves and coin necklaces is just a conflation of these two cultures that is just carried on to modern times. Undergarments, outer garments, and shoes. Undergarments was very, very simple chemise, what we think of as a chemise, or an old blouse and a long skirt. The undergarments, the skirt would have gone all the way down to their shoes. Very much like the hair being the sexual aspect of the Romani. Anything under the waist was considered dirty or impure. The Romani word is mirime. And so no part of their lower body would ever be visible, including the tops of their feet. Including the top of their feet. So the undergarment, whether a chemise or a long skirt, would go all the way down to the ground. Outer garments, they would have worn a swathe, very similar in style to the Indian sari, which would be worn over that simple undergarment. And this is basically a large rectangular piece of fabric that was tied over one shoulder and then was draped out under the other arm. I don't know how well this will show up on my camera. The purpose for this drape, not only as a body garment, a body covering, but there is a fold here, which passes in front and behind, which creates this very nice large pocket in the garment itself. It's very handy because you don't have to carry a purse at events. But in period, this would be for carrying children. The child would sit right here in the main part of the pocket, and then they would have room to slide 1 foot behind and 1 foot in front. And this garment can be, a lot of the pictures show it as just a single color. Sometimes it is illustrated as very patterned or ornate, and these can be worn over just that simple tunic or chemise. Sometimes they are shown worn over a garment that has visible embroidery or decorations on the sleeves. It's even shown being worn over dresses that were prevalent during a particular time and place. So we have some depictions of Romani women where the outer drape is worn, and you can see, I'm not a seamstress, very blousy sleeves or other ornate sleeves that would indicate that the drape was being worn on top of a full dress that would have been worn by non-Romani women of the time. And then shoes. In most copies of art, feet are not shown, so we don't have a great depiction of footwear. Also because the long skirts prevented the ability to see the feet. I say a lot in the evenings. I apologize. We can assume that bare feet were most prevalent. The second most popular would be a simple piece of cloth wrapped around the foot and secured by a cord at the ankle. So this is my third content warning. The following slides are examples of Romani depicted in period artwork. It is accompanied by the title of that art, which often uses some of these terms. I do see a raised hand. Yes.
You have questions in the chat.
Ooh, thank you. I got carried away and wasn't looking in the chat. Okay, let me go back and read those for a moment. Thank you, Stefania. Stefania is my Romani sister, and you are welcome to jump in and talk over me or correct me.
No, you're doing good.
I just realized, you're four comments in a row here. Would the garments you described be worn by all, regardless of gender? No, this drape is predominantly depicted, almost entirely depicted, being worn by women. We do not have a lot of period examples of Romani male clothing, since the men were the ones working most, were working amongst the non-Romani. They are most often, they're probably going to be wearing whatever clothing prevents them from being singled out. They would probably be trying to blend in. So we don't have a lot of accounts of period male Romani clothing.
So traditionally, it is a baggy linen shirt of the area and baggy pants and boots. The guys kind of blend in no matter where they go. At Cris or other gatherings of the Compania, they might wear a vest that is embroidered with the family symbols. But they would also be wearing a diclo.
Sorry, I patted my head. I know I mentioned that earlier, diclo being a head covering. Are there any other questions okay. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. So here we see almost a tied turban head covering. We see a little bit of blackwork embroidery around the neck, but otherwise it's a very, very plain, simple tunic. And then we have the drape going across the body that we can see being tied over one shoulder. In this, we also see the same turban style head wrap. The drape is a little bit more elaborate, more ornate, and we can see that it is tied over what looks like sleeves, red sleeves that have been pulled up and tied onto another garment. This is the Italian artwork that I mentioned earlier, where we see a little bit of a step away from what we see in other artwork. And in this case, the head covering is a flat disc on the top of the head, which is tied under the chin. We also see a button on the side of the drape in these, and this is the only example we have where there is a button. In most cases, it was completely worn open on the side. This is an example of the head covering being worn more like a modern hijab, where it covers the entire head and neck. We see the drape And this one also looks like it may be pinned over sleeves that have been pulled up and attached to a simpler garment underneath. This one is a charcoal drawing, but we can see very simplified, or not even simplified, but very basic forms of this garb, where it is just what looks like a drape that has been tied in a knot over the shoulder. But we do still see the head covering. This is one of the few that I have that depicts women as well, that depicts men as well. But the reason I include this one is we can see here an example of that baby, of a baby being worn in the garment. So the first, we see 3 men in the foreground, but that first row of women, we see a mother carrying an infant in her garment. This one is a little bit harder to see, but in the foreground, we do see a Romani lady with a very simple head covering, and it looks like a pale pink drape. I'll let you look at some of these, but I'm going to kind of go through. This is one of the ones that drape is shown being worn over a much more elaborate dress. This is probably one of the fancier Romani garments pictured in artwork. We have the red work on the scarf, both on the top and the end of the scarf. We see tassels or a fringe, and then we see that drape being worn over a rather elaborate underdress. This is another one that shows male Romani in it as well. They're a little hard to see, but you can see a little bit of what Stefania was referring, just the loose baggy tunic and the baggy trousers with boots. This one we see worn over a simple bodice looking garment that was worn over the tunic or chemise. This is another one with the flat hat or the disc on top of the head as the head covering. Yes. So why is this class important to teach at a collegium dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? This comes down to cultural appropriation, and this definition is from Colors of Resistance. Cultural appropriation is the theft of cultural elements for one's own use, commodification, or profit, including symbols, art, language, customs, etc., often without understanding, acknowledgement, or respect for its value in the original culture. And I did highlight in this case, often without understanding. So what's the big deal? These costumes, like what we think of when we think of the Disney character Esmeralda, they perpetuate a harmful stereotype. For example, the costumes often mock or caricature Romani people as wild or savage. They dehumanize and misrepresent the Romani people. The romanticized view of the lifestyle, especially in association with culture, leads to significant harm to actual Romani culture. It's culturally insensitive. And the history of the Romani people has been marked by marginalization, discrimination, persecution, and severe poverty. And this kind of misrepresentation basically equates the erasure of extreme historical trauma. So having that conversation, I know for myself in my kingdom, it happens often enough that we will have newcomers come to events who will be dressed in what I could describe as an Esmeralda Halloween costume. And I was there once. We all started somewhere. There's a great before and after Facebook hashtag that's going around that, you know, gives side-by-side comparisons of what we looked like when we started playing in the SCA versus how we dress now. So I certainly do not want to insinuate that I am, that I think less of people who start wearing either store-bought costumes, Halloween costumes, or even that I am saying anything negative about people who show up to their first few events wearing that over-exaggerated and stereotypical Esmeralda fashion. But the reason this is important to teach at a DEIB collegium is we need to be having those conversations with people, and we need to be having those conversations with people in a respectful way that is going to keep them coming back to the SCA, that is potentially going to foster a desire to learn more about Romani culture and how to respectfully and accurately play Romani personas within the SCA. No one learns anything when you come at them, you know, with a raised voice, shaking your finger in their face. So that's certainly not something that I'm advocating. But I am advocating when we see newcomers that may be playing to this this Hollywood trope, that we stop and ask them if they're interested in having a conversation with us about their persona and about their garb. And this goes back to assuming ignorance instead of malice. Many people have never heard the word Romani, much less seen or read any historical accounts on them. At least in the US, the Esmeralda image may be the only frame of reference someone has when they hear the derogatory term used for the Romani people. And in my experience, the vast majority of people don't even realize that that word is a slur. And if this is the only reference point someone has, it might be easy to see the allure of choosing this as a persona. So ways that we can start the conversations. What is your persona? Oh, do you mean a Romani? May I ask you why you chose a Romani persona? Are you interested in some resources about the Romani within SCA period? Would you like me to point you towards or introduce you to someone who could give you the information and tools needed to play a Romani persona in the SCA as accurately and respectfully as possible? We all start somewhere. What are your goals for your persona? Does your persona have a backstory, a background story? The SCA's 501c3 lists us as an educational not-for-profit. So let's educate. And if you've ever had a class with me before, I post this Maya Angelou quote on just about all of them, because we can only do the best we can until we know better. Then when we know better, we do better. Thank you. And then I don't know why I do this. I guess it's just to prove that I have the bibliography. But the sources are also in the Google Doc link that I posted in the chat.
We do have 10 more minutes if there are any questions.
Hooray, I got through all of that in time. I love questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
What led you to wanting to portray a Romani persona?
Excellent question.
I want to hear the answer to this one.
I know you know this, don't you? Anyway, when I first started the SCA, I was a party child. I did not really have much care for the daytime activities. I wanted to come out after court was over and drink and sing and hang out around a campfire with my friends. And so in my mind, I opted for the persona that I felt allowed me to do whatever I want, wear whatever I want, and say whatever I want. So I am one of those newcomers that stepped into the SCA thinking that they were going to play, for better or worse, Esmeralda. For the longest time, maybe the first 10 years, less than that. For a good long time, I didn't have an SCA name other than the slur that begins with G. That's all I was known as in the SCA. And for the life of me, I don't remember what I read or what I came across or what conversation I had with someone, but I was presented with information on the Romani, who they were, their culture, their plight, their history, and talk about, you know, a mind-blown moment. I am very, very hesitant to use the word penance. I love the research. My mundane undergraduate work is done in linguistic and cultural anthropology with a focus on Romani identity politics. But it was a case of, oh, I spent this many years doing a huge disservice to the Romani and the Romani culture. I need to spend at least that long, if not 3 times that. Not only doing the research myself accurately and respectfully portraying a Romani persona in the SCA, but also teaching this information so that if at some point somewhere out there in one of my classes, there is a little me out there, that this can be their mind blown moment. Thank you for asking that question, because I love calling myself out. I think that that's an important story.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
So I have a question. I'm a dancer.
Yes.
Is there any historic anything on Romani dance?
Yes. I'm trying to think of the term we use in linguistics. I think it is historic, humorously enough, historic recreation, or recreating. What we have to do is look at the map of the Romani diaspora and look at dance styles that were not the predominant of the time and place. We look at other dance styles that existed, and we track that, for lack of a better word, we track that path of dance and see if we can pick out elements of these styles of dances that match to the Romani diaspora, if that made sense. So if we see an element of dance, maybe a body posture or a arm posture, a hand hand gesture that we don't see a lot of in other types of dance in that time and place, but we do see it exist in other cultures that follow that line on the map. We can start piecing together what we believe Romani dance might have looked like.
So there is evidence that there was dance around the campfire and that kind of thing. Okay, because that could be stereotypical. I don't know.
Well, as
Hen,
far
do you
as-
want me to take that one?
Please do. Absolutely.
So, in SCA, I am Stefania Pane. I do not have a Romani persona, but I are one in real life. I am I are one in real life. I am Castellana's sounding block. Yes, there is dancing around the fires. It is never done with outsiders. Again, the top of our feet would show. Our headscarf might come flying off, so we never do it outside of where it would be seen by outsiders. Yeah, so most people don't understand that a lot of the Romani tribes, for the lack of a better word, companion, they originated from northern India. So a lot of our dance gestures, the bells we wear on our ankles, and not the hip scarves, we don't wear those, but the on the ankle, our hand gestures, and she'll confirm this one, even when I'm just talking, are very Hindustani in origin. Our head bobs, our movements, a lot of it is very northern India styled.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just here for emotional support.
And I love you for it. When I first started teaching Romani persona building classes way back when, I think 15 years ago now, I always mentioned in my class that I am Gaje. I am not Romani born. So if I ever was confronted or was asked to talk about my persona with someone who was culturally Romani, and they told me that what I was doing was disrespectful or that I was doing it incorrectly, then I would change my persona. No questions asked. I would cry a lot, but if I was ever told that I was doing this disrespectfully, that I would change my persona. And after one of my classes, Stefania found me outside of class and went, "No, you are not doing it disrespectfully. You are doing it wonderfully. Please don't stop doing this." And I'm like, "I'm going to keep you now." So, yeah.
Tamsin, your hand was raised first, and then Honor.
Sorry,
I just wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to respond to your statement there. Don't stop teaching because somebody tells you no. I'm Romani.
Okay.
That is my family history. I have been accused of cultural appropriation because I was presenting a Romani persona to someone who thought that we shouldn't be. That had no place in somewhere like the SCA.
Oh yeah, that's a whole different topic.
It really is, and it's one that as a people we have not sorted out amongst ourselves yet.
When
We might never. There's going to be fist fights involved at some point.
Not when I first started playing my inappropriate Romani persona, but when I first started doing the research and playing the persona I have now, wearing the garb I have now, I was approached by no fewer than 3 peers who told me that if I continued to play a Romani persona, I would never make friends. I would basically be chastised and castigated and would never get any awards and would never rise in rank. So I've been there. I am so sorry. Yes, Honor.
I have a half Romani friend who was raised by the Romani couple who smuggled him out of Germany when Hitler wanted him killed. And he told me a story about the linguistics professor that used him as a liaison with the Romani community in their area to study the ancestry of the language and trace it back. And the professor came back from a summer trip, all kinds of blown away and excited, and told him that he had found a valley in northern India that matched the dialect of the Romani group that my friend was in contact with. And they told him that there had been a famine in that valley, and for several valleys around, there'd been a famine because of weather changes. And they had decided to send everyone who could walk, women who were less than 6 months pregnant, and everyone else that could walk, out with instructions to stay away until the weather changed again and there would be food. And when this guy told them about the Romani group that spoke a descendant of their language, the first thing the headman of the valley said was, "Tell them they can come home."
I like the story. I don't know that I have a comment to it, but yeah. Sorry, reading chats.
Since this is the last presentation of the day, we can go all the way to the half hour, which is a couple more minutes.
Somehow I have lost my ability to see all the people, including myself. I'm just seeing basically a black screen. But that's okay.
The question was asked, when did Vardos start showing up in period?
I personally have not done research on the Vardo. I have tangentially read different accounts on whether or not the Vardo is period at all, or whether it was only used past period.
Now, I can state from family lineage, and we won't, if you really want to know how I know for certain, I can tell you, and it's hilarious, but I know in the 1700s, Vardos were still used. Or had started to be used.
I really wish I could see you all. Why can I not? Haha, people. Sorry. Yeah. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming to this class. I appreciate all of you. If you go back to the chat at the beginning of the class, I did post my name and my contact information. I am very open to keeping conversations going. I'm very open to messaging back and forth, emailing back and forth. I have both my email and my Facebook in the chat, whichever one is easiest form of communication for you. And I also have the link to the Google Doc that is basically the class notes for this presentation. I also teach a Romani persona building class if you are interested in playing a Romani persona. Some of the information is the same, but it is geared more towards persona building. And if you're a herald, I also teach a Romani persona for consulting heralds class, if you're interested. So, yeah.
Can I ask, is there a Romani persona Facebook group by any chance?
There are two. Neither one are terribly active. There is a Facebook group called Romani Life, which
Okay.
is a known worldwide Romani persona group, SCA group. The second, which is relatively new, is based here in Onstera, but it is not just for Onsterans. Onstera has started doing cultural deputies of our Kingdom Arts and Sciences office. And we have, what am I trying to say? Cultural or groups dedicated to the persona or cultural research for different groups. We have Jewish personas, Middle Eastern, Indigenous Americans, and I know that there's a couple of others, but we also have a Romani group as well. And I can maybe try to find that and drop a link to that one in the chat as well. Maybe.
I'll send you over a link, Barb. I joined it earlier today.
Thank you, Tamsin. We will talk some more. I just clicked on the link. I'm joining the group, and you and I will talk some more. Thank you.
Well, Castellana is putting in her link. I just want to thank you all for attending the SCA DEIB Collegium hosted by Ontier.